Hey everyone, and welcome to the Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. Good to be back here doing the Raw review. I've missed the last couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, I was coming back home to Reno from the Ring of Honor weekend on Monday, so I didn't have time or energy to watch Raw that week. And then the following week, I've been here in Oregon for the holiday and everything. I'm still on vacation, and you can tell because I've gotten very lazy with the shaving routine, but I was able to watch Raw this week, the final episode of Raw of the year, of the decade. You know I had to watch this show after seeing that they were going to have the big wedding on this episode, and I will get to that. Oh yes, I will get to my thoughts on the wedding soon enough. But before we get into that, let's get to the rest of the show. Kevin Owens opens up Raw, and he talks about how he didn't care much for how Seth Rollins and the AOP took out himself and Rey Mysterio and Samoa Joe last week. He says he will continue to call these guys out until he takes at least one of them down with him. Sure enough, Seth and friends appear, and Seth basically calls himself the Messiah. You know, it's his sacrifice that has allowed, this company to be where it is today and everything. And so then Kevin's like, okay, I'm just going to come fight you. So he gets out of the ring and goes to charge them. And as he's doing that, you can hear Seth go, geez, on the mic, which is pretty funny. He was so disappointed in Kevin Owens. So as the beating commences, out comes Samoa Joe to make the save. We hadn't seen him. He got beat up at the end of last week's Raw at the announce table. So he comes out here in his wrestling gimmick, ready to fight. So it's a big old, 2-on-3 brawl. Security comes in, and then the whole segment ends when Kevin does a big rolling senton off the top rope onto, the guys and the security and whatnot. A lot of extras being sacrificed for this segment here. Then after the commercial break, we see Kevin and Samoa Joe reach this understanding. They're going to work together to fight Seth and friends. I'm really liking where the storyline's going. I haven't been able to talk about it the last couple of weeks, but I do really like where they're going with Seth's heel turn and everything. He's no longer like the corporate stooge he was when he was with the Authority. He's his own man now. He claims to be the Messiah, but he's not the Messiah, as Monty Python might say. So I'm really curious to see where this goes, and based on what we see later in the show, it seems that Rey Mysterio is going to be involved in this as well. A six-man between, Rey, Joe, and KO versus Seth and friends has the potential to be very interesting. I'm really curious to see where that goes. First match of the night is a rematch from TLC as Alistair Black takes on Murph. I really enjoyed this match once again. These two definitely brought it. One of my favorite spots was this moment where they're on the apron and Alistair does like a Sparta kick to Buddy into the corner post shell. Match ends when Black wins with 2 consecutive Black masses, though. I did find it funny because after the first Black mass, Alistair catches him with his foot, lifts him up again, and Buddy, who is presumably out on his feet, still has the presence of mind to flick his hair back just before the second Black mass. Very way to commit to showing the face at all times. Besides that, though, it was a really good match. Backstage, Seth and friends decide to leave the arena voluntarily instead of being escorted out by security. Has anyone explained why Seth is wearing the one glove now? Is that just a heel thing to do? It's a very kind of Barry Windham thing to wear the one glove. Maybe it's something people with God complexes do. Maybe that's a Seth's thing. Then elsewhere backstage, we see Lana being confronted by Eric Rowan, who asks, why didn't you invite me to the wedding? And then he just thinks, he looks at his cage, he goes, we don't care. He just screams for no reason. Acting. We then see Rowan in the ring going one-on-one with local talent Kip Stevens. Kip tries to run and hide, but he gets beaten down anyway, gets hit with the Iron Claw, squiggity squash match. Then we go backstage to see Lana applying oil to herself, talking to herself the entire time, like you do. Charlotte Flair makes her way to the ring, and she announces she's the first person to declare her entry into the Women's Royal Rumble match. And then she makes an open challenge to see who will bow down to the Queen. Natalya accepts. It's a pretty good match here. Partway through, R-Truth and the League of Jobbers are in hot pursuit for the not retired 24/7 championship, despite what the online chatter was over the weekend. So during that whole fracas, Eric Young runs into the ring and Charlotte just boots him in the face. And then, again, hard-fought match here. Charlotte wins with the figure 8. Then after that matchup, we go backstage to see Becky Lynch formally announce that her match with Asuka for the Women's Championship is happening at the Royal Rumble, a rematch from last year. She wants to collect her debt on Asuka. She says even if it kills her. We get another Liv Morgan hype package. I'm seeing a few of these for the last several weeks, talking about the makeover of Liv Morgan. Here she says that, someone made her feel different, and they took it away from her, and the time for her to fight back, basically, is coming very soon. We then see the OC in the ring, talking about, they're gloating about their recent successes as of late. The Street Profits interrupt them and say, hey, you might have beat the Viking Raiders, but we beat you in our Raw debut, and we want to do it again. So they have an impromptu matchup between Anderson and Gallows Gallows and the Street Profits. Montez making all the silly faces. I mean, he's just so GIF ready, so GIFable is Montez Ford. It's a pretty decent match. It ends when the Street Profits win yet again. And so then after the match, they're backstage cutting a promo. Angelo Dawkins tries to explain what the multiverse theory is, and I think his system crashes internally because he just like stops mid-sentence and just like his mouth is agape as Montez tries to pick up the slack. And then it's announced later in the show that you've got the Street Profits, Anderson and Gallows, and the Viking Raiders in a triple threat next week for the Raw Tag titles. Should be a good one. In a handicap match, Drew McIntyre taking on Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. Hey, remember when those two were tag team champions at some point earlier this year? A great pre-match promo by Drew here. He calls himself the sexy Scotsman. He like leans over to a fan and says, "Do you mind if I lean here? I don't really care." He polls the audience like, "Do you think that these guys have a chance? Should they be worried?" Like, man, and then after, in the match itself, like he does like a 1, 2, 3 with the crowd before the Claymore kick, hits the future shot DDT, does a kip up, and then like pins the two at once. I know I missed the last couple of weeks on Raw, but did Drew turn babyface? And I missed that because I'm liking this version of Drew McIntyre now. So over the weekend, Randy Orton seemingly suffered a leg injury during a house show. They made a big deal of this online. So on Monday, Randy shows up to address his future. He's got the leg brace, the crutches. He is just hobbling in a lot of pain. Buko babyface sympathy for Randy as he's trying to find the words, to express, the pain he's feeling. Wrestling ain't ballet, and all the risks that the men and women in wrestling take when they get into the ring. Lots of, chance for him and everything. So he says he may not be able to come back at all, but if he does, he wants to try and shoot for WrestleMania. AJ Styles shows up and berates him for a while. AJ even puts his hands behind his back and dares Orton to strike, but Orton does nothing. So AJ laughs at him some more, kicks the crutch out from under him, and then Orton gets one last parting word in saying, "You might be a patient man, but I'm not." Hits the RKO out of nowhere. The knee is fine. It was an elaborate ruse. Mark Henry did it better, is all I'm going to say when it comes to, fake retirement angles. It was an okay segment. A long way to go for Orton to trick AJ into a false insecurity for the RKO. Probably other ways to go about it. Very weird for a babyface to fake a career-threatening injury in order to get the drop on his heel opponent. I don't think it was a great segment or a bad segment. To me, it was just kind of there. I think the moment of Orton getting that last little line in before hitting AJ was a cool little thing, though. We get a recap of Andrade beating Rey Mysterio at Madison Square Garden last week to win the U.S. Championship. Man, Rey could just not catch a break when it comes to having that belt. But good on Andrade for winning the championship, even though it wasn't on TV. I know a lot of people were kind of upset that, oh, why wasn't it on television? Why is it at a house show? And also the last time the U.S. title changed hands on a house show was at Madison Square Garden, where it happened on Thursday. So kind of history repeating itself. Good to see Andrade finally winning a championship on the main roster. Here he faces an unnamed opponent. We literally don't know who this guy is. And he's about to do the hammerlock DDT onto the guy onto the concrete like he did with Humberto Carrillo recently. Ricochet comes out and makes the save and issues a challenge to Andrade. So impromptu match between these guys. It's pretty good. Zelina interferes. Andrade wins. At this point, I don't really care about this match. I just want to get to the wedding. All right, well, it's time for the moment that you've all maybe been waiting for, maybe not, maybe been dreading. I don't know. Anyway, it's the wedding between Lana and Bobby Lashley. First question, why are all these chairs on stage that are just empty? It seems kind of awkward. I guess it's established that, no one wanted to come to this wedding. No one accepted the invitation, so it's totally empty. It's a funny visual, though. Even if there were people sitting there, the visual of all these chairs on the stage and the wedding is several yards away in the middle of the ring where no one is there. There's not even a best man or a maid of honor or anything. It's just Lashley, Lana, and the Efficient, who, by the way, is kind of a hidden gem in this thing because he's so deadpan and he's trying to move things along. At one point, after Lana chastises him for going off script, he was like, "Bobby, are you sure you want to go through with this?" Also, I got to give major points to Lashley for wearing the tux jacket with no shirt underneath and no sleeves on the jacket. That is a great look for Lashley there. So yeah, the crowd's getting restless. A few minutes into this, they want to see some interruptions. They want to see someone get smushed into that cake, that giant cake that's sitting in the ring. Also, quick question, how come these two didn't get special wedding themed lower third name graphics? This is their moment. You get the Happy Holidays Raw lower third. That's boring. It's a wedding. Everything should be, as far as this segment goes, aesthetically, everything, theme-wise, should be catered to that wedding, in my opinion. Kind of a small nitpick, though. Anyway, it's time for the vows. Lana tries to get a Lana Day chant going, which is a pretty funny ad-lib in spite of all the Rusev Day chants being thrown at her. Then, after Lana does her vows, she kisses Lashley, and they part, and you see, like, Lashley's foundation is all over Lana's face. Like, I guess, the foundation works because it makes Lashley's face not so shiny, because he's a very profuse sweater when you see him in wrestling matches, so probably a smart move to put the foundation on there to, avoid that, keep him looking nice and dry. But yeah, the fact that it was like all over Lana's face was pretty hilarious. And then to top it all off, as that's going on, then Lashley does his vows, and he's just repeating what Lana had said. Lana wrote the vows for him, and it's being repeated. Then they exchange the rings, and the officiant goes, "Oh boy, I hate this part. Who's gonna interrupt?" And someone comes out, and it's some guy. He declares that he was Lana's first husband, who says that she left him for Rusev, and now she's leaving Rusev for Lashley, and she'll do the same thing to him. And in the middle of his speech, Lashley just chokeslams him, and he flops out of the ring. And then, anyone else want to interrupt? It's some lady, and it's someone who claims to be Bobby Lashley's first wife. "Hey, you're not Crystal Marshall." And she starts to go into a story about how they met in the military. And before she even says like 2 sentences, Lana just decks her off the apron and she falls down. And then one more time, one more interruption, it's Liv Morgan, the woman we've been seeing vignettes for the last several weeks, finally shows up in a bizarre, like, half blazer. Like, it's a blazer, but one shoulder's exposed. It's like the duality, like the formal and the informal, the male and the female side, so to speak. So she's kind of crying, the love of her life is in that ring, and they're getting married, and how could this happen? And Lashley denies ever even touching Liv, but then she goes, "Oh, no. I'm not talking about Bobby. I'm talking about Lana. Oh, Jerry. There's Jerry chants. There's yes chants. This is just, what is going on at this point? Lana, who now has her shoes off and everything, she's like starting to cry. Then she slaps Liv. They has fight. And then the referees show up. They're very underdressed for this wedding, by the way. They're in completely the wrong outfit for this wedding. They are trying to break up the fight. It takes like 4 or 5 guys to separate these two petite women in their brawl. The crowd is dead silent, by the way. After the initial kind of reaction, as they're fighting, no one really cares anymore. The officiant is belligerent by this point, going, "You, man, yes. You, lady, yes." So he's starting to finish the ceremony. As he's doing that, who pops out of the cake? Of course, you can't have a giant cake without someone popping out of it. It's Rusev time. As he shows up, he beats up Lashley for a bit. There's big cake mess everywhere. Liv Morgan comes back, shoves Lana's face in the cake. We fade out. What just happened? This segment was, you hear me laughing as I'm describing this, because I think there's a lot of things to laugh at from this. This was so good and so bad. Like, as I'm watching this, I am able to, my woke brain or whatever, I can, oh, this is clearly bad writing, this is a bad segment, but there's so much good to be mined from this in terms of just like sheer stupid entertainment. Like, it's so bad you can't help but laugh. Like, seeing the extras show up and then immediately just get destroyed was pretty funny. The officiant, I thought, was special in his own way. Lana was really good at getting people to hate her. The makeup on Lana's face, I mean, that seems so spontaneous to have that happen there. Like, that doesn't seem very intentional. Maybe it was. If it was intentional, that's a genius move, because that made the whole segment that much more absurd, to have all like of Bobby's foundation all over her face like that. The twist with Liv Morgan, though, it's interesting. It's kind of a polarizing thing. I'm curious to see how they explain this in the weeks to come. I think the whole like lesbian or bisexual twist with Lana, like, okay, who could have really seen that coming? But it's like, I think it's a dated idea for like shock value at the very latest. Something like that really belongs in the mid-2000s. It's easy to say Attitude Era. It's more like mid-2000s, or Billy and Chuck era, so to speak, HLA. Hearing people, I think it's funny to hear people get mad, not necessarily about that twist, that, oh, Liv and Lana were supposedly in love, but, oh, what happened to my genius idea in my head that Liv Morgan should be part of the Firefly Funhouse and be Sister Abigail? Like, don't get mad that they're not using your ideas, folks. People getting mad over that, I think, is pretty hysterical on its own. That's a whole separate thing, though. So Liv Morgan being involved here, it's a very interesting way to bring her back, because all these, these vignettes, you really didn't really know where they're going with it. I thought it was going to be another Emelina kind of thing at first, and then it's, then people thought it was going to be a bait and switch or a swerve. Nope, she just comes back and she says, she she comes through with what she said in the vignette earlier in the night. It's like, I was, this person took something away from me, I'm going to get back at them. And she did. This was her moment. So, I think I'm curious. I'm very interested to see what they're going to do with Liv from this point on with Lana. When Rusev finally showed up, I think at that point the crowd had died a death. I thought Rusev was already kind of like over the two at that point. Like last week, wasn't he hanging out with the Rosebuds or something? I thought it was kind of weird for him to come back. I mean, it makes sense because you can't have this moment without Rusev getting involved, but I think it was like too late. I think the crowd was just kind of dead by that point. We all know that wrestling weddings never go off without a hitch, but this one to me felt like it ended pretty poorly. Like I said, by the time Rusev shows up, the crowd's already spent because there's already been 3 interruptions before that, and enough wild stuff to justify not needing Rusev really for it. I felt that maybe in this whole saga with Rusev and Lashley and Lana, we got maybe one good week of material out of it, and this was not that one good week. That happened weeks ago at this point. This segment, it had its moments. It was so good it's bad. No matter what you think about it, no matter whether you think it was great or crappy, one thing's for sure, this is definitely the end result of what happens when Vince McMahon and Paul Heyman put their heads together creatively. My final grade for this week's Raw, you might hate me for this, I'm going to say it's like a B-. I think that on the whole, this is a really strong episode of Raw for different reasons. Wrestling-wise, I think the matches were good to great, not really any kind of stinkers in the entire lineup. The opening bit, progressing the angle with Kevin Owens and Samoa Joe versus Seth Rollins and the AOP was really well done. Seeing Joe just come back, great way to reintroduce him as a competitor, as a babyface no less. That's kind of hard to pull off with Samoa Joe. Black versus Murphy was a great match. Yes, we've seen it before at TLC, but I think enough time had passed that, I think it's nice to see them do it again. Drew McIntyre is just awesome now. I've always been kind of a fan of Drew McIntyre's, but this persona, I'm like, yes, please, show me more of that. And, the wedding, it's a pro and a con this week. Like I said, there's enough good for me to think, this was a hilarious segment, but also it's an objectively bad segment as well for a lot of reasons. So I had to put both there. It was, I think it was a really strong way to end the year. I think for different reasons. Good character development, good matches, a wild moment that everyone's going to talk about for good or for bad. I mean, you really can't ask for much more than that. It was a wrestling wedding, and wrestling weddings are going to wrestling wedding. What can I say? But let me know what you thought about Raw this week in the comments section below. Give it a letter grade by going to the iCard in the corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane. I hope you had a happy holidays, folks, and I'll see you next time.